I didn't run away. That's what makes this harder to explain. I didn't pack a bag, didn't change my name, didn't vanish from anyone's life in a way that would raise concern. I kept showing up. I answered messages. I went to work. I smiled at the right moments. From the outside, I was still there. Inside, I had already left. The disappearance was subtle. It didn't feel like a decision. It felt like fatigue that never fully lifted. Like the sense that everything required just a little more effort than it should. I told myself I was tired, overworked, going through a phase. Phases are convenient. They promise an end. This one didn't have one. I started noticing that my reactions were delayed. Someone would say something funny and I'd laugh half a second too late. Someone would ask how I was and I'd answer automatically, without checking. I wasn't lying, I just wasn't consulting myself anymore. That scared me, but not enough to stop. Disappearing slowly has an advantage, no one panics. There's no moment where someone grabs you by the shoulders and asks what's wrong. You become quieter, flatter, easier. People adjust. They assume you're fine. I assumed that too. I kept a version of myself operational. Functional. It knew how to perform the tasks of my life. It paid bills. It maintained relationships. It made plans weeks in advance. But it didn't feel anything about those plans. I remember the first time I noticed the gap clearly. I was sitting with people I cared about, listening to a conversation that should have mattered to me, and I realized I was observing it the way you observe a movie you've already seen. I knew the rhythm. I knew when to nod. I knew when my turn to speak would come. I also knew I didn't want to speak. That wasn't sadness. It wasn't boredom. It was absence. I told myself I was just more reserved now. More mature. Less reactive. I framed the numbness as growth. That made it respectable. Acceptable. No one questions growth. The truth was harder, I had stopped participating emotionally because it felt safer. Feeling had become unpredictable. Heavy. Demanding. So I reduced my exposure. At first, it helped. Life became quieter. More manageable. I didn't get hurt as often because I didn't reach as far. I didn't get disappointed because I didn't expect much. I built a narrow emotional corridor and lived inside it. I didn't realize I was shrinking my life to fit my tolerance. Time passed strangely in that state. Days blurred, not because they were busy, but because they were interchangeable. I would reach the end of a week and struggle to remember anything specific about it. Nothing bad happened. Nothing good either. That neutrality frightened me more than pain ever had. I tried to correct it gently. New routines. Small pleasures. Distractions that promised feeling without risk. They worked briefly, like pressing on a numb limb and mistaking pressure for sensation. But numbness always returned. The hardest part to admit is this: disappearing felt like relief. Not happiness relief. Relief from expectation. From the pressure to want something. From the responsibility of being fully present in a life that had begun to feel misaligned in ways I couldn't articulate. I didn't know what I wanted instead. I only knew that staying fully engaged felt unbearable. So I stayed halfway. Relationships adapted to that distance. Some people leaned in, trying to reach me. Others stepped back, assuming I needed space. I didn't correct either assumption. Correcting would have required me to explain something I didn't yet understand myself. I let the distance do the talking. I became reliable but unreachable. Available but not open. People described me as calm. Low maintenance. Easygoing. They didn't see how much effort it took to maintain that emptiness. There were moments when I almost came back. Sudden flashes of emotion, anger, grief, longing that rose unexpectedly and made everything feel sharp again. Those moments terrified me. They felt like cracks in a wall I depended on. I learned how to seal them quickly. That's the thing no one tells you, disappearing doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you stop allowing feeling to stay. You become skilled at pushing it out before it demands action. Over time, that skill becomes reflex. One night, I stood in front of the mirror and tried to remember when I had last felt genuinely present. Not productive. Not stable. Present. The answer didn't come. What came instead was a quiet, devastating thought: if nothing changes, this could be my entire life. Not tragic. Not dramatic. Just muted. Manageable. Slowly emptied of urgency and meaning, until there's nothing left to lose and therefore nothing left to feel. That thought didn't make me cry. It made me cold. Because I realized I hadn't disappeared by accident. I had chosen absence over risk. Silence over truth. Safety over presence. And I had made that choice so many times that it no longer felt like a choice at all. It felt like who I was. That was the moment I understood something crucial: you don't have to leave your life to disappear from it. You just have to stop showing up inside it. And I had been gone for a long time. Disappearing has momentum. Once you're halfway gone, coming back feels more dangerous than leaving ever would have. I learned that the hard way. The longer I stayed in that muted state, the more foreign intensity became. Strong feelings felt intrusive, like strangers knocking on a door I had sealed shut. I convinced myself this was stability. I told myself I had simply outgrown drama. That emotional distance was maturity. That I was protecting myself from unnecessary pain. Those explanations sounded reasonable and they kept me from looking closer. What I didn't notice at first was how my body began to react. Not dramatically. Subtly. I slept but never felt rested. I ate without appetite. My shoulders carried a tension I couldn't locate. My breathing stayed shallow, like I was bracing for something that never arrived. The mind can normalize almost anything. I began to avoid situations that might provoke feeling. Deep conversations. Confrontations. Even moments of joy that might demand presence. I chose routines that asked nothing of me emotionally. Predictable, contained, safe. My world shrank without anyone noticing. People still talked to me. Still included me. Still assumed I was fine. I had become excellent at seeming okay. So good that I started to believe it myself. Until the day I didn't. The breakdown didn't announce itself with tears or panic. It arrived as exhaustion, the kind that doesn't lift with rest. I woke up one morning and felt an overwhelming resistance to the idea of continuing like this. Not fear. Resistance. As if something in me was finally pushing back. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at nothing, and realized I couldn't remember the last time I had wanted something strongly. Not needed. Not planned. Wanted. The absence of desire felt more alarming than any failure ever had. Desire is a sign of life. Without it, everything becomes maintenance. I saw then how my disappearance had been a form of escape. Not from circumstances, but from responsibility. Responsibility to feel. To choose. To risk disappointment. To be visible inside my own life. I had chosen absence because it required nothing of me. That realization hurt. I had always believed disappearing was something that happened to people victims of loss, trauma, or tragedy. I hadn't recognized it as something you can slowly choose, one withdrawal at a time. And once chosen, it becomes comfortable. Too comfortable. I began noticing how I avoided mirrors not physically, but psychologically. I didn't ask myself questions that didn't have functional answers. I didn't reflect. Reflection threatened to wake something up. But something was waking anyway. Small cracks appeared. Irritability. Sudden waves of sadness with no clear source. Moments where the numbness lifted just long enough to reveal how much I had been avoiding. Those moments were unbearable. I considered doing what I had always done, suppressing them, returning to the narrow corridor where nothing hurt but nothing mattered either. I was good at that. Experienced. But something had shifted. I couldn't unknow what I had seen. The hardest truth to accept was this: disappearing had not solved anything. It had only postponed pain and multiplied it. Every feeling I avoided had waited patiently, growing heavier with time. I realized that if I continued like this, my life would remain intact on the outside and entirely absent on the inside. I would age. Accumulate memories I couldn't feel. Be present at events without ever arriving emotionally. That terrified me. I stood at a quiet crossroads no one else could see. There were no external pressures forcing a decision. No crisis demanding action, just an internal reckoning. Either I returned slowly, painfully to a life that might hurt again. Or I disappeared completely, not by leaving, but by staying. That was the moral dilemma I couldn't escape anymore. Returning meant risk. It meant reopening doors I had sealed. It meant facing the reasons I had disappeared in the first place: disappointments, losses, truths I hadn't wanted to integrate. Disappearing meant safety. Predictability. Emotional anesthesia. I understood then that numbness isn't neutral. It's a choice. A choice that trades pain for absence. A choice that trades danger for emptiness. A choice that feels peaceful only because nothing is alive enough to disturb it. The question that formed was quiet but relentless: is a life without pain worth living if it also has no presence? I didn't have an answer yet. But I knew this: staying halfway gone was no longer sustainable. The internal pressure had grown too strong. Something in me wanted to come back, even if it hurt. Even if it changed everything. Even if it meant discovering that the life I had built no longer fit the person I had abandoned. I took a breath deeper than I had in a long time and realized that this was the closest I had come to a real decision in years. I could feel fear. And for the first time, fear felt like proof that I was still here. Coming back was not a single act. It was a series of small, uncomfortable permissions I gave myself to feel, to hesitate, to be affected again. After years of managing life from a distance, stepping back into it felt like walking into cold water. Every instinct told me to retreat. I didn't. I started with the simplest thing: noticing. Not fixing. Not analyzing. Just noticing when something stirred inside me instead of pushing it away. That alone was exhausting. Presence demands energy when you haven't practiced it in a long time. Feelings returned unevenly. Some days I felt too much irritation, sadness, longing all at once, with no clear cause. Other days I felt nothing and panicked, afraid I had lost the thread again. I learned that recovery isn't linear. It's messy, frustrating, and quiet. But it's real. I stopped treating numbness as safety. I began recognizing it for what it was: a refusal to engage. Every time I felt the urge to disappear, I asked myself what I was actually avoiding. The answer was rarely catastrophic. Most of the time, I was avoiding vulnerability. Returning also meant accepting loss. Some connections couldn't survive my reappearance. The distance I had created had become part of their foundation. When I showed up differently, it disrupted the balance. A few people stepped back. Others didn't know how to meet me anymore. I let that happen. For the first time, I didn't chase stability at the cost of honesty. I allowed relationships to either adapt or dissolve without forcing them to stay intact. That hurt. But it hurt cleanly, not like the dull ache of absence, but like a wound that can heal. The biggest shift was internal. I stopped measuring my days by how little went wrong. I started measuring them by whether I felt present in them. Whether I could remember them clearly. Whether they left an impression. Some days were still quiet. Some were still difficult. But they were mine. I learned that disappearing doesn't protect you from pain, it just delays it and removes your ability to respond. Coming back doesn't guarantee happiness. It guarantees participation. And participation is risk. I stopped asking myself how to feel safe and started asking how to feel alive. Those two goals rarely align. Safety seeks stillness. Aliveness requires motion. I don't romanticize what I lost while I was gone. I don't pretend those years were necessary. They weren't. They were avoidable, and that truth still stings. But I also don't punish myself for disappearing. I understand now why I did it. I disappeared because I didn't know how to stay present in a life that had disappointed me. I didn't have the tools to grieve, to adjust, to choose again. So I chose absence. Coming back required learning those things late. If I have one confession left, it's this: you can disappear without leaving. And you can come back without moving an inch. The distance is internal. So is the return. If you're listening to this and recognizing your own quiet withdrawal, the numbness, the half-presence, the way your days blur together, don't wait for a crisis to bring you back. You don't need to blow up your life. You don't need to reinvent yourself. You only need to stop abandoning yourself in small ways. Say what you feel when it's inconvenient. Stay present when it's uncomfortable. Let yourself care even when it hurts. I disappeared without leaving. I came back by choosing to stay here, in this moment, with all its uncertainty and weight. And for the first time in a long time, I can honestly say this: I'm here. And that is enough to begin again.